What is going on, my good people? Mike Hidalgo here. Thank you for joining us on another FCP Euro DIY. Today we're going to be working on a 2008 R56 MINI Cooper S. Today on the R56 behind me, we're going to be covering how to replace your vacuum pump. This is going to be applicable to your R56 vehicles equipped with the N14, both S and JCW models. Now, the vacuum pump is responsible for running, most importantly, the brake system on the car, allowing you to have a brake pedal when you're driving. As it is a turbocharged car, you don't have the traditional vacuum in the intake manifold that you would get from a non-turbo vehicle, especially with a direct injection vehicle. Things change a little bit. Now, to learn a little bit more about why the vacuum pump is so important, be sure to click the link in the description below where our very own Nate Vincent and Ben Morawski take you into the deep, dark world of vacuum pumps. But as far as we're concerned for today, we're just going to be covering the replacement of the pump. Now, a couple things to note. These don't have a set mileage interval. It is normal for them to have a little bit of play here at the shaft. These are cam driven, so you don't want to have a bad vacuum pump. And by bad vacuum pump, I mean one that can't spin, as these will cause internal engine damage should they seize up. Ask us how we know. They do have a seal, so if you have an oil leak coming down the side of the block, more than likely your vacuum pump seal has failed. You can just replace the seal. However, it's a good job to inspect the whole pump. You can open them up and see what the inside looks like if you're worried about the condition of the pump. We've seen these last up to 200,000 miles. We've seen them fail at 60,000 miles. It really depends on the life of the vehicle. Doing and staying on top of your oil service interval is going to help, as these are lubricated by oil. So if you have a bad habit of not changing your oil, then you can imagine that the oil inside the unit is going to be bad, and it's going to shorten the lifespan of the vehicle's pump. Today we're installing a Pureberg unit along with a genuine vacuum hose replacement. Now, the vacuum hose itself isn't necessarily mandatory, but like anything else plastic under the engine bay, over the years and many heat cycles, things get brittle, things can break and crack, especially when you're removing them. So we have one just as insurance, and we're going to go ahead and replace it and show you where those are connected. But before we get started on that, let's take a look at some of the tools we're going to need for this DIY. For this job, we'll be using an 8mm socket and a 10mm socket. Depending on your tools, you may be able to sub those out for some wrenches instead. It's a little bit tight to work with though, so you're going to have to see what you got. You'll see we have a number of extensions for our 1/4-inch ratchet, again, just to handle how tight it is to work in there, a torque wrench, and a flathead screwdriver and a magnet tool. Pretty basic. So with that, let's go ahead and get started on this DIY. All right, my good people, we are under the hood of the R56. We have a couple things to remove before we can access our vacuum pump. We have our vacuum line, which we talked about just a moment ago. We have our intake tube that goes to our air box and turbo. Now, while not super mandatory, I advise you work on a nice cool engine that we don't risk burning yourself, especially on the hot side of things. So to get started, we're gonna work on removing the vacuum line. So let's do that now. To get started, we're going to start by removing the vacuum line from the vacuum pump. There's a small tab that you simply push in on. I like to push them into the pump and then pull out, and the pump is separated from the line. We're going to let this hang out a little bit. Once we get this intake tube out of the way, we'll show you where the other end is connected. Now you'll notice our car is equipped with a catch can, however the stock connector pieces are still there, so we'll disconnect them from that end. We're going to start over here by our turbo. We have a clamp that we're going to go ahead and undo. It's using a flathead screwdriver. You can use a Phillips as well, unless your clamps have been changed before. All right, moving right up, we have an electrical connector to undo. Small tab on the bottom side. We have a hose clamp right here. This goes to one of the lines heading to our catch can currently. We'll go ahead and undo this one here. You could probably just swing this one over, however, it takes 2 seconds to undo the clamp. All right, with that undone, we can move on forward. Now up here, there's a small tab on this cover that you can just pop up from underneath with a flathead screwdriver. There we go. Set that to the side, and this hose will just come right out. Tuck that one over there. We have one more clamp here at our mass airflow sensor that we're going to undo. And now we can go ahead and pull off this intake tube. Pull it off from our turbo, and we'll just set it to the side. This line can get tucked over for now. Now we can go ahead and see the bottom portion of our vacuum line and where it connects. We're gonna go ahead and same thing, pinch on the tab underneath and pull that off. Just be mindful, it's coming through the firewall. You don't wanna just yank on it. If you can get your hand on the back, grab that line so you can separate this piece. And we're just gonna set this to the side for now. All right, with our intake tube out of the way, our vacuum line out of the way, we have a better view of our vacuum pump. We have another vacuum line situated on it right down below. We're gonna go ahead and disconnect that one next. You can also pull it off after if you'd like, but it might just get in the way of things, so pull it off now. Then use a little screwdriver to break the seal. Then we can go ahead and tuck that to the side. And now we can work at getting to the bolts that hold our vacuum pump on. So let's go ahead and do that next. So we have our 8mm socket on our 1/4" ratchet. We're gonna go ahead and start with the easy to reach top bolt. Now, what I'm expecting to see when we get this pump off is some oil running down the block. I'm just gonna guess, based on the mileage of the car and the condition that it's in, that this is original and the seal has started to leak. The second one we're doing is right here behind the brass fitting. There's an 8 right there. Gonna be a little bit tight. Now to access that bottom 8, we have to undo the 10mm bolt that holds these turbo lines in place, just to give us a little bit of room to get our socket on. So I'm using a 10mm socket to undo this bottom 10mm bolt that holds our bracket in place for these lines. With that, I have my magnet tool handy so I don't lose the bolt as we pull the socket out, assuming it's ready to come out. There's our 10mm bolt. Magnet tool is going to make it super handy to fish those out. Now that should give us just a little bit of play so we can get our 8mm socket in there. Make sure you pull out both the bottom bolt and the bracket. This also helps hold the 10mm bolt in place, which holds this line in place. So both of them have to come out, A, so you can get this bracket out, and B, so you can have a little bit of play in the line to get to the bottom 8 and be able to pull this vacuum pump out. Now, as you can tell, based on the grime that's on this bracket, I'm gonna go ahead and suspect that this is the original pump, meaning that the seal is probably toast, and we should see a lot of oil residual down below, which is a good thing why we're doing this now, at about 130,000 miles or so. I'm just gonna wiggle the pump back and forth. It's cammed into the back of the exhaust cam as it's cam driven. We're going to pull that out gently. And just by looking at it, this seal is as flat as can be. There's a ton of oil buildup down here, meaning this has been leaking for quite a while. We're going to grab a rag here. It's normal to have a bit of shaft play like this. Our new one has the same thing. And then should we turn it over? The pump itself feels fine. It's still making vacuum. You can feel a little bit of resistance, then where it gives, a little bit of resistance, then where it gives. Just due to the age, the mileage of the car, and the job that we're doing today, we're gonna go ahead and install a new pump in it anyways, but you could just service this seal, which I bet you if we pulled it out would be hard as a rock, super flat. So what we're gonna do now is we're just gonna clean up our block a bit, clean up some of that residual, and get ready to install our new pump. Now we have our new pump. We're gonna take off this bottom fitting for now so we don't have to fight it once it's back in the car. And we're just gonna take a look at the position of our exhaust cam and rotate the pump so that we can key it in. You can put the pump side by side and match them up so you can see what the orientation of the gear is. We're just gonna take a visual look, and we might have to pull it off a few times to get it right. Oh, also one thing to note, you'll see our seal looks nice and shiny. We put a little bit of fresh oil on there just to help seal everything up when we put it in. Go ahead and do that before you install it. These typically come covered in a little bit of oil in the bubble wrap from the manufacturer, just from testing. So usually that is some more than adequate lube for install, but never hurts to add a little bit more. There we go. Pump is keyed in. Now we're gonna go ahead and line up everything using the top 8mm bolt. That way we know that the bottom's lined up as well. Looking for that bolt hole. Get that one started. We'll leave that one finger loose for now. Then we can go ahead and install our bottom bracket. We're going to install the bottom 8mm loose as well. That way we have some room to get the bottom 10mm bolts in afterwards. We know that everything will line up nicely. Now we can take our bottom 8 and the small bracket attached to it. This one might be a little bit tricky just due to the room we have to work with and my oversized fingers. With that one started by hand, we can just continue snugging it up a bit. I'm not going to make it tight just yet. Using our 8mm socket and our extension on our 1/4" ratchet, we're able to just weasel it underneath this turbo line. It's really kind of an annoying fit, but you can certainly get it without putting too much stress on either the line or the threads on the bolt. Now before we get this 8 snugged down all the way, my next goal here is just going to be to make sure we can get the 10mm bolt started down for that lower bracket for the turbo line. So using a screwdriver, and sorry for my big head, I'm just going to look for the threads, make sure everything's lined up properly, and just get that one finger started before we get too crazy over here with this 8mm bolt. So now what I'm doing is we're just going to work on getting the bottom 10mm bolt started on that little bracket that comes off the vacuum pump for our turbo line. Small piece of gaff tape or electrical tape just on the edge of the head of the bolt so we can feed this in without dropping it a bunch of times. You can often put earth magnets in your sockets or magnetize them just to help with that, but a little bit of tape just enough so that we can rip it off once we get the bolt started. All right, we have our 10mm bolt in. That one's nice and snugged up. Now we can hop back up to the 8mm and button that up all the way. Both of the 8mm bolts get torqued down to 10 Newton meters. Now we're just going to snug up that 8mm bolt now that the 10mm bolt situation is all sorted. Again, 10 Newton meters is the torque spec for the 2/8. Now realistically, it's going to be a little bit tricky to get a torque wrench in here properly. Luckily today we brought the calibrated wrists, so we're just going to use those to snug up the 2 bolts. All right, there's our bottom one. I'm going to top over to the top one. Now for the top one, we have more than enough room to put an actual torque wrench on it. So let's do it the right way and torque that one up. All right, and we have our top one. Torque wrench is set to 10 Newton meters. Just got to finish snugging up the bolt. There we go, not a whole lot. Now with that, we can reattach the lower vacuum line and then continue on with the install of our intake tube and everything else. Now with our pump situated and our bolts snugged down, we're going to install our lower vacuum line to our brass fitting here. Make sure it's nice and snug. All right, beautiful. Now we're going to install our new vacuum line. Again, you don't have to replace this one, but sometimes they crack or fail just due to age and heat. One thing to note, the new replacements are a superseded part number. The design's just a little bit different than the one that you may have removed from your car. Again, this is an 08, so it's a little bit older. The line's just a little bit of a different shape. I'll grab the old one so you can compare. So you can see the fitment's a little bit different, but it'll still fit. This is a new part number from BMW for these cars. So no worries if it looks a little bit different. Don't be frightened. So we're going to install our line down here to the feed line that goes to our brake booster. So it's a very important line as it gives vacuum to our system and allows us to have brakes, which is why I recommend just replacing it if you can. So don't mind the view here, the catch can is in the way. But I'm pressing the tab in while I join the two together. Now we're going to go ahead and install the new line. I'm going to reach behind this catch can just to hold the line that goes into our firewall that feeds directly to our brake booster. Heard a nice click there. That's exactly what we want. Give it a little pull. Double check with the flashlight. We shouldn't see any of the tabs or the ridges on the inside line showing, so that's good. We're good to rock and roll there. We can just leave this one hanging out up top here, which is nice. It's even more out of the way than the old one used to be. You can pull this grommet off, and if we want, we can go ahead and plug it into our vacuum pump now as well. We can run our lines back over. This one runs underneath the intake tube, and the other one's going to run above. And we can slowly feed this over. Get the pipe set up on the turbo. Nice loose fit for now. All right, that's exactly what we want to see. That looks good there. This will look good up there. All right, perfect. So now we're just going to work in the reverse. I'm going to snug up our turbo line first, and then we can do the rest afterwards. Now we're going to go ahead and tighten down our clamps. With that nice and snug, we can reinstall one of our lines going to our intake tube up here. Oh, can't forget to put the hose clamp on. Snug this clamp up nicely. Get this electrical connector hooked back up. Heck yeah. You can swing this one over. Get this one fed onto the top of our valve cover there. Just kind of pops on. And then this one has the plastic clip that holds it in place. And we have our intake tube to our actual mass airflow sensor. Our tubing has a little notch cut out so that it can key in around the body of the mass airflow sensor itself. And we'll go ahead and snug that up. And with that last clamp situated, my good people, that is going to conclude this DIY for today. Overall, a straightforward job on the N14, a little bit tight on that bottom 8mm and 10mm bolt situation, but otherwise super doable. A great DIY, even if you're not replacing the pump. Take a look. If you have a bit of a leak and you want to do the seal, just do the seal. More than likely your pump will be okay, which you can verify by spinning it by hand. If you like this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments on what we did today, leave those in the comment section below. And if you like this DIY and you want to see more like them, please consider subscribing. We make new ones all the time. As always, thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you in the next one.